Hello and welcome to our webinar series, Stories from the Archives. In this series, we explore the stories behind the treasures and unique family history artifacts found in the special collections here at American Ancestors. My name is Ginevra Morse, Vice President of Education and Programming. I will be your moderator for today's program. American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history and are pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. I do want to note that some of us are still broadcasting from home to yours with various limitations and distractions. We do apologize in advance if there are any interruptions from our end, and we thank you for your patience. If we were to lose connection for any reason, not to worry, you will still have access to a full recording on our website and YouTube channel. Now, the two experts that you'll be hearing from today are Judy Lucey, Senior Archivist, and Todd Pattison, Conservator here at American Ancestors. Judy joined the staff in 2003 and works to collect, catalog, and care for the millions of individual items in the R. Stanton Avery Special Collections. She received a BS in Education from Northeastern University and an MS in Library and Information Science from Simmons College. Todd works to preserve and care for the Society's collection of books, manuscripts, and fine art. He comes to NEHGS with more than 25 years of experience from the Northeast Document Conservation Center and has also worked as collections conservator at the Harvard College Library. Now, family Bibles are not only treasured heirlooms, but they can also provide key genealogical information on the generations that came before you. This webinar will look at some of the items in our own collection, detailing the stories behind them, and then we'll provide some tips for preserving Bible records in your personal archive. At any point during the presentation, feel free to type your question into the panel in the right of your screen. We'll address those at the end. There is no handout for this session, but you will be able to watch a recording of this event starting tomorrow, again on our website and our YouTube channel. So if you miss something on today's first listen, not to worry, you can always review the presentation later. All right, so with all of that out of the way, I will now turn things over to Judy.
Thank you, Ginevra, and welcome again, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you today as we share some more stories from our archives, and we're going to take a closer look at one of the most frequently requested items in our collection, family Bible records, and the individuals and families who own them. Historically, the family Bible has been the centerpiece, the fixture of every family home, and for many, it may have been the only printed book they ever owned. The family Bible has often been passed down from one generation to another, and it's an important source of vital statistic information. Long before vital records were recorded by civil authorities, the family Bible was the official record for recording the family's birth, marriage, and death dates. Now, sometimes these events were recorded at or just after the actual event, which is why the title page is so important in genealogical research, because the publication date allows us to determine how close to the events the entries took place. Now, not all birth, marriages, and deaths are recorded close to the time of the event, as we can see from this image on the right. Now, the arrow is pointing to 5 marriage entries, all in the same hand, with the marriage dates ranging from 1898 to 1918. So these were recorded much later by the same family member and perhaps copied from another source. Now, Bibles can also contain lots of family memorabilia, and I've seen everything from locks of hair, poems, prayer cards, obituaries, marriage licenses, and much, much more. And these items can often provide insights into the life of the person who owned the Bible or other members of the extended family. We have thousands of Bible records in our collection. We have some original Bibles with their records intact, but we have many others that are just the original family pages. But we also have many that are simply photocopied or transcribed. And recently, we've begun to accept high-quality images of family Bible records. Why? Well, because here at NEHGS, we consider the vital record data to be genealogically valuable. This is the information that we want to preserve. And so therefore, unlike diaries or letters, we will accept vital record information in a variety of formats. Now, the best way to find out what we have in our collection is to use our library catalog. That is the key to unlocking what's in this library and archive. Now, we've begun to digitize our Bible records, and these can be found in our digital library and archive. So here's a screenshot from our digital archive, and you can click on the Family Register and Bible Record title that you see here. Now, this collection, along with church records and family histories, are only available to NEHGS members. So these particular subject areas are gated, but everything else you see here is open to everyone. Now, in the early 2000s, we began a Bible recruitment program. We sought out original family Bibles or just accepting the Bible family records. Our goal was, and it still is, to acquire and preserve the vital statistic data contained within the Bible. So many of our members who come to our library continue to try to fill out those blanks on the family tree, and they're searching for those elusive birth, marriage, and death dates. But given the limited shelf space that we have and the popularity of this program, we really are interested only in acquiring the family data. So we make it clear now to potential donors that we really only want the record family information. But we do make exceptions. Now, when do we keep the entire Bible? Well, we do follow certain criteria. We accept all Bibles, no matter the condition, that are published before 1820, because these are often rare and unique. In addition, those published after 1820 that have some sort of unique or rare qualities or were limited editions, we collect those as well. And we also look for special elements in the Bible, such as the engraving of a person's name or a family name on the cover. Now, the Bible that you see here in this image with the red cover was published in 1853. And it just has this beautiful decorative details. And this is one of the reasons why we kept it. It's in such pristine condition. And also the name of the owner is also engraved on the cover. So there you can see it sitting on our shelf in the archives. So now let's look at some of the Bible records that we have in our collection. And today I'm going to focus on original records and some of the early original Bibles that we have. Now, on the 7th of May in 1884, a year before his death, Reuben Rossen Dodge, who was a member of NEHGS, visited us, and he donated several items to us related to Edward Rossen and his family. Now, Dodge was an avid genealogist, and he devoted much of his life to Rossen family research. Among the items he presented to us was the William Rossen Family Bible. Now, William was Edward's son, and Edward Rossen was, as you see here, the Secretary of the Colony of Massachusetts Bay. Now, Dodge provided on this leaf in the Bible, some provenance or background information. He discovered this Bible in Braintree, Massachusetts, and had learned that it had been preserved through 6 generations. It was still in the Rossen family hands when he convinced the owner to give up the Bible and give it to him. Now, on the left, this is the portrait of Edward Rossen, which, along with the portrait of his daughter Rebecca, we received from Reuben Rossen Dodge the same year in 1884. And the father and daughter portraits we still have, and they hang on the 7th floor in our research library. But on the right, you can see the original Bible, and you can see, given its condition, we do restrict its use. There's lots of red rot. The cover is detached. When we received the Bible in 1884, it not have a title page, so we don't know when it was published, although there have been some attempts to try to date the Bible. But as you can see, it needs conservation work, and Todd will be talking more about this Bible later in our presentation. So here's a page from the Bible. Now, as the owner of the Bible, you can see here at the top where the arrow is, William Rossen records his name. And just below that is recorded his 1673 marriage. And this entry was written by Edward Ting, who certified that the marriage of William Rossen and Anne Glover was legally published. And Ting married them on July 11, 1673, at Anne's home. Now, he names also the witnesses that were present, and they were Habakkuk Glover and Edward Rossen, William's father. And he also mentions that other friends were present. Now, the James Richards Family Bible contains family records of one of the early families who settled in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, James was baptized in Pitminster, Somerset, England in 1632. And he came with his family as part of the Great Migration to New England in 1633. Now, his father, Thomas, initially settled in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and he later removed to Weymouth, where Thomas died. Now, James would go on to settle in Hartford, and he married there Sarah Gibbons, who was also of Hartford. Now, although the title page is missing from this book as well, the New Testament page isn't. And if you take a look at the image on the left, the arrow is pointing to the publication information, and you'll see that the Bible was printed at London in the year 1599. Now, on the lower right, the donor inscribed his name on the inside cover. It was donated by Francis Jackson in October of 1854. Now, Jackson was one of our earliest members and a frequent donor of books and manuscript materials to our small but growing library at the time. Now, on this screen, you see separate pages of the Bible, but I can assure you that the family records have not been removed. Now, these family entries really do contain some interesting details. The image on the right, you can see it records the place of birth, which for many of the family members was Hartford, but at the very top, it says that Sarah Richards was born in England, and it names the county where she's from, Warwickshire. But one of the most unique features on these pages, if I draw your attention to the image on the left, is the hand-drawn black coffins next to the family death records, which I just think is so different and unique. Now, the Julia Decker Bible is a fairly recent acquisition. It was just donated last year. Now, her name is engraved on the front cover, but which you can see is detached from the spine. Julia was the daughter of Isaac Decker and Catherine Hoffman, both born in Ulster County, New York. Julia was born in 1811 in Reading, Fairfield County, Connecticut, and later she lived in Pittsford, New York, but she died in 1886 in Rochester. Now, the birthplaces for all her siblings are recorded, and they show the family moved frequently from New York to Connecticut, to Pennsylvania, and then back to New York. But the image on the right, you'll see that there were other items that we discovered in the Bible. Some very decorative bookmarks, some cards, but there's also 2 membership cards here that you see the arrows pointing to. And the card on the lower right belonged to Julia Decker's brother, Joseph. And we learned from reading this that he belonged to the gospel temperance movement, where he pledged his word and honor to neither touch, taste, nor handle as a beverage any intoxicating drinks. Now, the Decker Bible was published by Harpers and Brothers of New York City, and it was published in 1846. And this is one of those Bibles that, despite its post-1820 publication date, we will keep intact and not remove any family records or title page. And this isn't just because of Julia's name engraved on the front cover. This is an illuminated Bible. which was at the time of its publishing in the 1800s, was considered the huge publishing event of the 19th century, and it's considered the most heavily illustrated Bible ever printed. So this is one we would want to conserve for long-term preservation, and Todd will be showing us the recent conservation work done on the Bible in a little bit. Now, the Bible records for the Prairie, Downer, and Smith families were donated in 2005, and it contains the birth, marriages, and death records of all three families who resided in Preston, Connecticut. Now, the Bible records for the Robert Prairie family include some unusual things, and they include the births of several of their slaves. And they record the births of the slaves, but also the given name of the mother. Now, slavery in Connecticut, I think out of all the New England states, Connecticut had the largest number of slaves through the American Revolutionary War period. And they were rather slow to abolish slavery, passing the Gradual Abolition Act in 1784. But here you see the slave births recorded on this paste down of the back cover of the family Bible. The entries include Jasper, and as it says, a Negro boy belonging to Robert Prairie, Esquire, who was born on the 10th of March, 1793. Now, just below this are two entries, and they show the birth of a daughter and a son born to the same woman, and the name looks to be Barshab. Now, because these births occurred after Robert Prairie's death in 1790, these entries now indicate that these slaves are owned by his widow, Mrs. Sarah Prairie. It's really difficult to trace slave ancestors before the 1870 census. Slave schedules of the 1850s and 60 usually only record the given name, so descendants of slaves frequently have to turn to records produced by the slave-owning family, such as wills, property records, bills of sales, etc. Now, this slave Bible was purchased at auction in 2017. Now, the slave-owning family was Benjamin Silver and his family. They were very large landowners in the Darlington area of Harford County, Maryland. The slaves are mentioned in the image, on the page on the image on the left, and they're listed under the title servants. What I find interesting about these records is that the last name of each slave is given. So there's names such as Fanny Pinion and William Pinion. And then there's also members, presumably of the same family, the Ash family, Hannah Ash, Ellen Ash, Eliza Ash, and their birth records are recorded. Underneath this entry, it states that they were all manumitted, freed in 1851, and this was to take effect at certain ages, as on record. So evidently there's either a family document or an official document perhaps filed at the county level that shows that all of these slaves were eventually freed once they reached a certain age. By the mid-2000s, the Bible recruitment program was winding down, but we continued to actively collect Bible records for our holdings. And by this time, we were really looking to diversify our holdings. So we turned to purchasing Bible records at online auction sites, and we looked for records such as for people of color, and or in places where vital records were recorded much later, such as in upstate New York. Now, this is the Bible record for the Nathan Pointer family, and this was purchased on eBay in 2010. Now, Nathan was an African-American merchant, originally of Philadelphia, born in Delaware, but removed to Philadelphia, and later San Francisco, who eventually settled at Victoria, British Columbia in the late 1850s. Now, sometime in the early 1850s, Nathan moved his family from Philadelphia and their three children at the time to San Francisco. Now, you can follow the migration patterns in the birth records of the children that you see here. The first 3 children were born in Philadelphia, and then daughter Matilda was born in 1857 in San Francisco. Now, the Pointer family was part of a larger Black community in San Francisco, and they moved there in hopes for a better life. Nathan opened a clothing store with another African American by the name of Mifflin Gibbs, and they called it the Philadelphia store. But it wasn't long before they faced discrimination and violence. Now, hearing of their plight, the governor of British Columbia, James Douglas, who was a fervent abolitionist, invited them to settle on Vancouver Island. So they sent a committee of 35 men on a British ship in early 1858 to determine whether or not Vancouver Island would be suitable for settlement. And they came back and reported that indeed it was. Land was cheap and the laws were friendly to Blacks. So in 1858, about 800 settlers left to head north, including the Pointer family. Now, after the Civil War, many of these families returned to the United States, but Nathan and his wife Sarah remained in Canada, where Nathan died in 1903, and he and Sarah are buried at the Ross Bay Cemetery in Victoria. Now, the Dudley Family Bible was purchased by us in 1958, and it documents the life events of an Irish Quaker family of Ireland who settled in New York City in the early part of the 19th century. Now, this was kept by Samuel Dudley, one of the children of Edward Dudley and his wife, Mary Eves. Now, Samuel records the marriage date of his parents, which was November 19, 1790, and also the place, which was Dublin, Ireland. And he also lists all the births of his siblings, including himself. But he also includes an interesting detail. He includes the death dates of his parents, his grandparents, and their place of burial, which was in a friend's burial ground in Knockballymar in County Tipperary. Now, the Dudley family, if you study Quakers in Ireland, were fairly prominent, and they were one of the principal Quaker families in the Ross-Cray area of County Tipperary. What I love about the Dudley Bible is that Samuel uses this not only just to record events, but he uses it really to document his own family history. And we can see this by looking at this page. This is the memorandum page that was in the part of the family record. Now, he documents here his voyage to America on the brig Triton, so he names the ship, the date of their arrival, which was September 1809. And he also goes on to record the date and place of his naturalization. And he mentions meeting a passenger by the name of Charles Vecchio. And by the way, he also tells us that he's a witness to his naturalization. Now, Charles Vecchio is a member of the well-known Vecchio family of New York City, and they were famous for their looking glass manufacturing business. They were originally from the Lake Como district in northern Italy. But why was Charles traveling from Dublin? Well, there's also a branch of the Vecchios in Dublin, and they engage in the same trade as the New York branch. Now, we don't have many Irish Catholic family Bible records in our collection, which is why I thought it might be interesting to highlight this Bible record for the Bose family. Now, again, this is something that we purchased in 1938, and it documents the families whom we think might be brothers, James Bose and John Bose, and their wives and children. Now, the Bose family, from what we can gather from these records, appear to have arrived long before the Great Famine, sometime in the late 1830s, early 1840s. The marriage records that you see here on the left have some very interesting details. They not only include the date of marriage, but we also learn the church and the priest's name where James Bose and his wife Catherine were married, and that was at Holy Cross in Boston. And the same for John. But John was married at St. Bridget's Church in New York City. But it also records, if we look at the image on the right, the county of origins for James, which was Kilkenny, and his wife Catherine, which was County Cavan. And on another page that's not on this slide, we learn that the exact place where the Bose family came from in County Kilkenny, which is the townland of Lisdowney, and this was recorded with the death record of John Bose. But like the Dudley family Bible, the Bose family records presents lots of genealogical clues, and it helps us to really maybe make that leap into Irish records. Donated to NHGS about 5 years ago, the Wendell family Bible, to me, is a real treasure. Now you can see from the decorative detail on the front and back covers that the Bible was owned by a couple. Their initials are engraved on the front that you see here on the right. And their marriage, we believe, occurred sometime in 1787, which is recorded and engraved on the back. Now, the entries for the Bible begin with the couple's children in 1789, so we don't know the couple's names. But I want to point out the 19th century birth records on the right. This page isn't the original page, but was added at some later date, probably to add these additional entries into the family Bible. Now, the parents of these children are recorded on the opposite page at the bottom, where you see the red arrow. The father is Carl August Wilhelm Wendell, and his wife was Clara Dorothea Mueller, which records their marriage and their dates of birth. Now, this is the branch of the family who emigrates to America. Now, they came some time in the late 1860s, and they settled in the New York City area. Now, knowing that they probably will never return to Germany, they took this family Bible with them. So now we're working on translating the entries in this Bible so we can learn more about the Wendell family and hopefully share more family stories in the future. Now, I've talked about some of the Bibles we have in our collection, and perhaps you've wondered, did my family Bible ever leave a record behind? Perhaps you have family lore that says, yes, so-and-so had a Bible. Could it have ended up anywhere in a library or an archive? So where do you begin searching? Well, I would start out in looking locally where your ancestors may have lived. Now, for some of those who may have moved on from the area where they originally came from, you may have to do a little collateral line research. But it's always good to look at local historical societies, local public libraries, sometimes in their local history rooms or special collections. Sometimes we'll take in family Bibles, and also local archives. But if you want to expand your search, I recommend you use Archive Grid, which is a searchable database of, I think it's over 5 million archival records. These provide material descriptions of archives, and they include catalog records from WorldCat, and also they harvest the finding aid descriptions from the World Wide Web. Another place I would suggest you look is the FamilySearch.org wiki page for U.S. Bible records, because they have lots of links to online resources and websites, including our Bible Record Digital Archive. It also has a link to the DAR Library Bible Record and Transcription Project as well, along with other Bible record databases and transcription projects that you'll find online. Now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Todd.
Thank you, Judy. And I would like to thank everyone for viewing the webinar. I'm going to talk today about the preservation of Bibles and their family records with an emphasis on the overall object rather than just the few record pages alone. First, I want to make sure we are on the same page when it comes to discussing this topic. The origins of the word preservation date back to 14th century England, and its initial meaning was to guard, watch, over, or keep. So the goal of preservation is to minimize change. The more items change, the more they come into our own time period, and the less they can tell us about the people and the time period in which they were produced. Now, preservation refers to all of the activities that you do to care for and protect your objects now and into the future. Conservation, on the other hand, is only a small part of preservation, although some people seem to use the two terms interchangeably. Conservation is the physical intervention to objects to stabilize them or improve some type of functionality or aesthetics. The conditions in which you store your family Bible records are important. You would like to have a stable temperature and humidity. Large swings in either can cause damage on a small scale as the objects expand and contract, which can typically happen as we change seasons from a colder, drier environment to a hotter, more humid one, and then back again. Light can also act as a catalyst to the chemical reactions that harm your collections over time. So it is best to store materials in the dark whenever possible. Since the environment these objects are stored in is so important, they should not be placed in attics, basements, or garages. If they are stored in your living areas, you are more likely to notice if there are changes in their environment. When handling a Bible, you want to inspect it before you first pick it up to make sure you understand any special handling it may require. Bibles are often heavy, sometimes much heavier than you expect. You need to be sure to ask for help if you think it is larger than you can comfortably use. You should also look for signs of fragility, such as loose or detached boards or brittle or damaged paper. These can make the object much more difficult to handle, requiring extra care. Remember, your family Bibles are often at greatest risk when being handled, and there's a terrible sinking feeling if you pick up your Bible and damage it. American Ancestors has produced a couple of short videos that go over storage of family collections and how to handle old books. You may find these helpful. Links to the videos will be given in a follow-up email after the webinar. You should always think about using some type of cradling whenever you handle any bound materials. Every book has a different preferred angle of opening, and forcing it past this point can cause damage. You could keep volumes from opening too far by using standard foam cradles, or even clean towels or pillows to make a soft cradle. The most important thing is to avoid stressing the covers or the binding by opening the Bible more than it can reasonably withstand. Boxing is really one of the best things you can do to protect a family Bible. People often think only about boxing fragile items, but I think it is just as important to box objects that are in good condition to help maintain them in that good condition. Boxes should fit precisely, because if they move around inside a box, then they can easily get damaged. There are commercially available custom fitted boxes, but you can also have a cloth covered box individually made by a bookbinder or a conservator. A box is also a very nice way to label an important item like your family Bible. You wouldn't want to place a label directly on the object, but you can easily label the box so you know what is inside. Since you'll need exact measurements for a precise fit, you should use a square measuring setup. On the left is a measuring device designed for bound volumes, but you can accomplish the same thing using square materials and a ruler. On the right, 2 bricks are used to create the squared area. If you work with a local binder or conservator, they can often measure the volume for you, but for some commercial vendors, you will have to provide those measurements. The important thing to remember is to measure the widest and longest square parts of the Bible and have the box built from those dimensions. Now, you really need to be careful of the term archival, as it has no real specific meaning. If you order a commercial box, it should be made out of acid-free, lignin-free, and buffered or unbuffered paper or board. Acid-free means that it would have a pH above 7. Lignin-free means that if it does contain any wood pulp, the damaging lignin has been removed. And buffered means that it has an alkaline reserve to help it better withstand environmental factors such as pollution or acidity that can be picked up through the air. Now, I've listed 2 vendors of custom fitted commercial boxes that make acceptable storage enclosures for Bibles, and these links will also be included in a follow-up email after the webinar. Now, here on the left is the Rossen family Bible that Judy showed earlier, housed in a commercial storage box with standard dimensions. On the right, acid-free fittings have been added to the box, along with space for a hand to assist in removal of the Bible. Even though the original box was not fit to the dimensions of the Bible, the altered box will prevent it from sliding around inside, which could have potentially created more damage over time. Sometimes the box can demonstrate the importance of an object to others. This is the cloth-covered box that I made for my own family Bible, which was printed in 1865 and came to me through my mother's side of the family. It was more expensive to make than a commercially available box, but it signals to some of my relatives that this is an important object, so they will need to handle it very carefully. Cloth-covered drop spine boxes are usually heavier and slightly stronger than commercially manufactured ones, so they can be a better choice in some cases for larger Bibles. Now I would like to discuss some of the particular conservation concerns with family Bible records. First, before you undertake any conservation treatment, you should be very clear about why you are considering having an object worked on. What is the goal? Is it stabilization, renewed function, improved aesthetics? A lot depends on the future use that you see for the Bible. For many people, a family Bible is a historic object, and it's not a functional book that they plan on reading frequently. The damaged binding and missing pages seen in the upper image on a 1728 Bible, for instance, are not a high priority for conservation. It is the family record pages in the image below that are often of the greatest interest and the most in need of treatment. With the Richards Bible that Judy showed earlier, the damage and crudely repaired binding are an indication of use and the importance of the object to previous owners. For instance, the front board is a later addition, likely replacing a missing original front board. Since the repairs were possibly done by a family member, or at least commissioned by one, they're probably of greater interest than some of the original elements of the Bible. The inscription inside the replaced front board shows that the Bible has been part of the collections here at American Ancestor since 1854. Our goal is to preserve as much historical evidence as we can, and the repair of the Bible to some prior state, such as trying to return it to what it looked like in the early 17th century, would likely remove or obscure part of that evidence and history. The manuscript pages, as Judy pointed out, are the most important part of the Bible, as the text itself was printed and would be held in multiple copies. From a conservation standpoint, the damage from the iron gall inks is of the greatest concern, as they continue to damage the paper over time. The arrows point to 2 of the coffins that Judy mentioned earlier. The one on the right is missing some of the support page because of the ink deterioration, and the coffin on the left has cracks in the paper for the same reason. These pages can be removed from the volume and treated separately, but in this case, we are leaving them intact and will interleave with an acid-free buffered tissue to passively help the pages over time, while maintaining a good environment for the Bible. The most important thing for us, which is the same in your collections, is to copy this unique information. Surrogates for the original, whether electronic or physical, are so important as they allow for the information to be held in multiple locations, helping to ensure its survival. Reformatting this material also gives you the opportunity to share the information with others, especially family members that do not have easy access to the Bible. Many modern cell phones take high-quality images, and scanners are quite inexpensive. Even photocopiers can make physical copies that can be shared. Unfortunately, the large size of many Bibles and the age and fragility of the paper involved may require the help of a professional in reformatting some family record pages. Now I'd like to take you through a typical conservation treatment that was performed on one of the Bibles that was shown earlier. Judy has already mentioned the importance of the Harper Illuminated Bible, one of the most famous Bibles ever produced in America. And as she mentioned, this copy also has the name of the owner, Julia F. Decker, stamped in gold on the front board, a highly personalized binding. For these reasons, it was decided to conserve the Bible using a technique called rebacking, which creates a new board attachment using a new leather spine underneath the original covering materials of the Bible. The detail on the far left shows where the original leather is lifted on the spine edge of the board, while the image next to that shows a detail of the lifted paste down on the inside of the same board. To the right of this, you can see the original spine after it had been removed from the volume. And on the very far right is the new rebacking leather of a sympathetic color that will be used to help structurally repair the binding. The weight of the boards and the text block dictated using extra material underneath the new leather for added strength. The left-hand side of this slide shows airplane cotton used as the primary board attachment, and it's white in this image. This is a thin material with great strength and flexibility. On the right is the new leather covering the cotton, creating two layers of the reback. This gives a very strong attachment of the boards on the exterior of the binding. The interior attachment of the boards needs to be just as strong to make sure that they don't pull away at the hinges when the volume is opened. The arrow points to another layer of airplane cotton, along with several layers of Japanese paper, toned to match the color of the original paste downs. These are placed underneath the original materials to repair this part of the binding. On the right, you can see the interior hinge after all of the material is put back in place, showing that as much of the original material as possible was retained. On the left in this slide is the binding after treatment with all of the original leather put back in place. On the right are two details, one before treatment showing the missing leather at the top of the spine, and the second showing where the loss has been filled in with the new leather spine. Conservation of a large Bible can be quite expensive. You can see the amount of steps and work involved with this particular treatment, which was actually fairly straightforward given the good quality of the text block. Loose pages, broken sewing, or heavily damaged pages can make a treatment much more time-consuming. Even though the Bible has been stabilized by the conservation treatment, it is still important to house it in a protective box to better preserve it for the future. We decided to make a box in-house with a conservation quality, acid-free cardboard to make it as light as possible, given that the Bible is already quite heavy. The box is made from a single sheet of board, which is cut, scored, folded, and glued to the exact dimensions of the object. On the left is the Bible in the box, showing the precise fit. And on the right is one of the folders housing some of the family records that were housed in the volume that Judy showed earlier. Having those records in a folder that is easily accessible, or even copies of the family record pages if they cannot be removed from the Bible, can really lessen the handling and wear on the volume itself over time. I wanted to leave you with some actionable steps if you have a family Bible in your own collection. First, make sure you know about any records or other family information that might be contained in the Bible. Many Bibles have a few pages for this specific use between the Old and the New Testament, but you might also find information on the end sheets of the binding or even tucked into the Bible randomly. If you do find any manuscript family records, I would strongly encourage you to copy that information in some form and share it with others. I also can't stress enough the importance of boxing your Bibles, which offers great protection in the long term. Please also be sure that you know the environment where your Bible is stored. Check to see if you are getting seasonal changes and if there is an easy way to minimize those changes. Also, please keep in mind that Bibles are fairly durable, so don't panic and think you need to do everything right away. Most of the Bibles that we looked at today are at least 200 years old, some much older, and they likely did not have the best storage conditions for the majority of their existence. And the last thing that I'd like to mention is that there are professionals to help you if you have questions about the preservation or conservation of items in your collection. Don't be afraid to reach out to someone. The professional organization in America for conservators is the American Institute for Conservation, also known as AIC. If you do seek out conservation treatment, you might want to make sure the person performing the treatment is a member of the National Professional Organization. AIC's guidelines for finding a conservator can help you find someone in your geographic area who specializes in bound volumes and paper-based items. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Todd and Judy, for that wonderful presentation. Before we get to your questions, I do want to mention that now until the end of August, you can save $20 when you become a member of American Ancestors. Simply go to americanancestors.org to learn more and to take advantage of this great summer sale. And I will also be sending you this information as well as several of the websites and other links shared throughout the presentation in my follow-up email. So stay tuned for that. All right, so let's get to your questions. Go ahead and type your query into the question panel, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the time provided. So first, Todd, we have a question for you. Deborah says that she has an illuminated Bible from 1867. It has the engraved names of her great-grandparents on the cover. Lots of great information within. The cover has become detached, but otherwise in good shape, and she keeps the Bible in an enclosed barrister bookcase. Is there any wisdom in seeking a bookbinder to reattach the cover, or should I leave it as is?
Well, you could really do either. I would definitely recommend, if you're going to leave it as is, to have a box constructed for it. Having it in a bookcase is a good idea because it does protect it from dust. But most barrister bookcases are wood, and so wood is very acidic, and it can also off-gas, and so that over time can potentially damage the Bible. If the text block or all the pages are in fairly good condition, then it's a little more straightforward treatment for a bookbinder or conservator. So if it's something that you feel that will get any handling at all, then you probably would want to consider at least having some treatment done, maybe something that is similar to what we saw with the Decker Bible.
All right, and Amy asks, since you just mentioned the Decker Bible, Todd, Amy asks, how did you attach the old leather to the new leather in that project?
So I used for that PVA, which is a very strong, low moisture adhesive. I did not want to introduce moisture to it for fear of darkening the leather, because that's certainly something that could happen, because that leather at this point is now roughly 165 years old. And so you have to be very careful about any kind of adhesive that you're introducing to that. I could have also chose some kind of water-soluble adhesive for that, but since you won't be able to soak the leather up again because of the problems with darkening using moisture, I went with the PVA because of the low moisture content.
Thank you. Judy, a question for you, and I'm sure a lot of people have this question, but Penelope asks, what is the procedure for donating the family information from a Bible to Nhgs?
Well, you just need to contact me. You can use my email address and reach out to me. You can then let me know what format you're going to send it in. If you're thinking of taking images, I can provide you with the DPI and the other necessary information for that. And then it's pretty straightforward after that. Once we agree to that, you can just send it to my attention, either digitally or in another form, in another way through the mail. So it's pretty easy.
And again, if you're okay with this, I can send this in my follow-up email, but is there a general email that folks should use if they do have either the information, photos, or questions about donating?
Oh, sure. It's jlucey, Lucey, at nhgs.org.
Great, thank you. Now, a question for maybe both of you. If you do have a family Bible in your personal archive and it's been in the family for generations, is there any harm in continuing to add to that Bible? Are there any considerations that you suggest, using pencil or ink or something else? So maybe, like I said, I think it's kind of a question for both of you, but maybe Judy, if you want to start, and then Todd, if you have any suggestions on considerations, let us know.
Well, I've seen people use pen. Now, I don't know if you remember the Wendell Bible I just showed, but later entries were done in a blue ink pen. You certainly can continue to add to the Bible. I would be very careful with probably what you would use. What you want to be very careful of is you don't want, if you use something like a pen, you don't want it to bleed through. There are archival quality types of pencils and pens, things, writing instruments that you could probably use if you want to make sure that it'll hold up, and then also it won't damage the paper. And I'm sure Todd probably has more interesting things to offer for that than I do.
Well, I think that it's not a bad idea to add directly to the Bible, but I'm also going to suggest another option, and that would be to box the Bible and have a folder or some folders where you can add that information to the box without the potential for causing harm to the original. So we saw in the case of the Wendell Bible where they added a page later when they needed to add things. This is kind of the same concept, except instead of using some glue and attaching another page or something like that, you're keeping it all together in that box, so it's in the same format, but you're not running the risk of doing any damage to the Bible. And it also gives you the opportunity, if you can have a box made with, a quarter of an inch of space and have a filler in that until you add more information, then you can add all kinds of information to that.
Great. Another question for you, Todd. Shannon says, I have a Matthew Carey 1811 Bible from my Weldon family of Cambridge, New York. It's currently stored in a handmade wooden box that was made by an ancestor. Should I remove it from that box since I don't know its composition?
Well, I would say, it has a lot of provenance because your ancestor made that. So depending upon the fit of the Bible in the box, you might be able to put some kind of enclosure around the Bible so that there's a buffer between the wood and the Bible itself. The other thing I would also think about is how difficult is it to get the Bible out of the box? Because of course, if it's sitting in a box and it's very tight, you won't be able to get your hand in to pull it out. So that's a consideration as well that could lead to damage over time. So you want to think about both those things. So, you know, it is a tough call. You might think about a different box for the Bible, and then, you know, making sure that there's a connection between the Bible and the box, you know, placing a note in the box that was made for the Bible saying what that box was made for and where that other Bible is now.
And I think, Todd, another question for you. A few folks have asked about, you know, if they don't have the Bible itself, but they have the family record pages, you know, how do you go about preserving the pages? Do you put them in sleeves, a folder? How do you go about that?
Well, I like paper folders because you can get an alkaline buffered folder, and over time it you know, it might passively help the paper itself, but I would tend to put those papers into an acid-free buffered folder and then inside an acid-free buffered box, maybe with some other family papers. So, you know, think about all the papers that you have. You know, get a bunch of folders for them, a storage box for them, and that way you can keep them kind of all together and keep them all safe that way.
Great. Maybe a question for you, Judy. Douglas asks, is there ever any significance to where loose items are placed in a Bible? So you showed some ephemera that has been, you know, obituaries or prayer cards or other items placed, interleaved within the Bible itself. Do you ever see that they are placed at a certain position? And should that somehow be documented too if you're going to remove those items?
Well, they could have indeed been placed there for particular reasons. What we do in the example that Todd showed with the folder, for example, those items that he removed, he noted the page number that they were on. And so what we do is if we do remove those items, we do place them in folders to protect them. We make note of where they were placed in the Bible for the importance, because it is part of the provenance of the Bible. But, you know, oftentimes because if it's newspaper clippings or other items, we want to remove them from the pages. So yes, it's quite possible that, like a photo album, they could have been placed on certain pages for certain reasons, particularly decorative bookmarkers and other things.
All right. And I know we've covered a lot of this throughout the presentation, but maybe as a way to sum up and a last question for today's presentation, a question for you, Judy. Again, do we welcome the contribution of old family Bibles to our collections? How large is our collection, and do we digitize that information for public use?
We do welcome old family Bibles. I'm always open to them. We don't receive as many as we used to in the past, but we want to preserve those family record information. That's very important for us. Given that even though our name is New England Historic Genealogical Society, we are also AmericanAncestors.org. So when I look for Bible records, I go beyond the scope of New England and the Northeast, because I think it's one genre that we can collect where we can expand that, you know, pretty much to the whole country. As for digitizing, yes, we actively digitize. We have not done much digitization of Bible records this year. We do have a backlog from before COVID. We've been focusing on the digitization of church records this year. But yes, we continue to identify the thousands. I would have to say probably between 4,000 and maybe 5,000 Bible records that we have in our collection. We do continue to identify and scan them and place them online so that we can, in the future, so we can make them available.
All right. Well, thank you again, Judy and Todd, for your fantastic presentation. Again, all of the URLs and some of the additional information and contact information I will be sharing with you in my follow-up email. You'll also have access to a recording of this session on YouTube and for free, and on our website, AmericanAncestors.org. If you have more specific questions about your family history research, you may consider scheduling or working with our research services team. They can do research on your behalf, and you can learn more by contacting research@nhgs.org. Or you can also take advantage of our free chat service, Chat with a Genealogist, at americanancestors.org/chat. This is free and open to the public, so if you do have a quick reference question, go ahead and contact us there. It's available Tuesday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And like I said, that service is free and available to all. And once again, I will be including this information as well in my follow-up email. So thank you again for joining us. As you leave the event, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American Ancestors and to keep these programs free and to create other free programs for you and audiences around the world. If you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center at americanancestors.org/education. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.